Vukovic. I'm the editor-in-chief of Rue Morgue magazine, and I want to thank you all for coming out to this screening of Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door. You guys really show your true colors by coming out on the Sunday afternoon to see a film like this. It's a film we were really impressed by, obviously, because we chose it as our cover story a couple of issues ago. And I've had a personal, very deep connection with this film personally. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to introduce Monica, our associate editor, who's going to interview Jack Ketcum for you guys. And that's all I have to say.
Hello, my name is Kuebler. I'm the associate editor at Rue Morgue magazine. And now I realize that all you guys came to see this film. So this Q&A is more for you than it is for the two of us. So I'm going to ask a couple preliminary questions, but then right away I'd love to open it up to you guys so that you guys can ask any burning questions you have after seeing both The Lost and The Girl Next Door. It's a very rare opportunity to have the author from who these films have been adapted in the house and to be able to pick his brain, so I hope you do take advantage of that. But I'd like to begin by just giving you a little bit more background about Dallas, and I'm going to have him do that in his own words. Can you let us know what was that first attracted you to the horror genre?
When I was just a little kid, the first time I was allowed to stay up after 12 o'clock at night was to see the old Shock Theater stuff on Channel 9 in New Jersey. And they started out with the original Frankenstein, went to the original Mummy, the original Dracula, Werewolf of London, Wolfman, the whole bit, and they just all the sequels. And I remember sitting in the dark with my mother because she liked this stuff too. My father was in bed, just being scared out of my wits when Boris Karloff's Mummy hands. And I loved being scared out of my wits from a very early age. I was crazy about dinosaurs, I suppose most teenage boys are, or pre-teenage boys are. And I've often said that scary movies, dinosaurs, and Elvis sort of kept me sane. So I got to this stuff from a pretty early age.
Jack's been writing horror for over 25 years now, but interestingly enough, when you first got into the publishing industry, it wasn't as a writer. Can you tell us a little about that, and then what made you want to make the transition into writing?
I was an agent for 3.5 years, an author's agent, after trying supporting writing by acting and acting by writing, which is sort of like supporting backgammon by chess. And I thought, well, it's time I got a job because I'm bored. So I managed to get a job in a literary agency, and I did that for 3.5 years, which is I learned an enormous amount, but it was a grueling experience. And I left a very angry guy, but I also left thinking, hell, if I can sell some of the crap I've been selling, I can maybe sell my own stuff. And I had a lot of contacts in the magazines, especially through that. So for the next about 4 years, I wrote for the magazines. I wrote for rock and roll magazines, men's magazines, anybody will take me, basically. I wrote for Women's Wear Daily, and classic decorating home crafts. But, if the check came in, I was a happy camper. My first check ever came in from Swank magazine. It was for $300, and I was like, yes! And then that got a little hand to mouth after a while, because I was just looking for the next story all the time, the next proposal. And I've done like 24 stories in 1 year at one point. That's like 2 ideas worked out every, it's like 2 stories a week. And I thought, well, I've just seen these really cool hard films that have come out. Texas Chainsaw, Night of the Living Dead. And although the books were great, and there was a resurgence of horror at that particular time, with Stephen King being in the forefront of the movement, but things like Peter Straub's Ghost Story and these wonderful books. I thought, well, what I've not seen in any of these novels is the equivalent of what I'm seeing in the movies, which is really right in your face, right down to the very minute, to the very blood splatter. It's never been quite that up close and personal. So I wrote a book called Off Season, which is exactly that. I tried to fill that niche. And I guess it did, because it pretty much grossed everybody out except hardcore horror fans.
Now, you also wrote The Girl Next Door pretty early in your career. I'm sure everyone's wondering how you first stumbled across the Sylvia Marie Likens case, which is, of course, where you got the inspiration for the story, and what it was particularly about that case that made you want to explore it in fiction.
J. Robert Nash's Blood Letters and Bad Men, a great horror, a true crime encyclopedia, which in those days was like three volumes. I think they pushed it together into one, but it's still out there. It had a photograph of Gertrude, the woman who was Ruth in the film. And the photo just haunted me. She looked, at once, she had a Jackie Kennedy hairdo. She was gone, almost like a Walker Evans photograph from the Great Depression. And she had lovely eyes, but had this really haunted look. And the image haunted me, and when I read the story, I thought there's an awful lot going on here. Violence from one woman to a woman, particularly a young woman. The participatory, let me say that again. The nature of the nature of everybody participating, you know, kids being invited in, secrecy, the sense that this was going on in such a strange moral vacuum that nobody was talking about to anybody in this little Indiana town. And I sat on that for about 5 years trying to figure out how to do it. I almost tried to do it as a true crime book at one point. Didn't want to do that because I don't know Indiana and didn't feel like traveling there. When my mom died, I went back to my hometown to dispose of her house and her affairs and settle up. And as a writer, you often have one of the benefits is you have time. You don't have to punch a clock 9 to 5 every day. So I did this over the course of quite a bit of time. And I'd be living in New York and traveling to New Jersey to do this, do that. And at one point it just hit me. This was a dead-end street when I grew up. Very like the street in the girl next door. And when I was growing up, there were those secrets. There was a woman up the street we'd go to her house for lunch and she'd greet us at the door with a black eye. Nobody told anything about it, nobody said anything about that to anybody. And I thought, this is a place where this story can actually happen. I can set it here. So I started writing it there, and it was almost like a memory play. I put my good memories and my bad memories of growing up in that time and place, I grafted them onto the story of Gertrude Banaszewski and Sylvia Likens.
Now, one of my favorite stories about The Girl Next Door is a story you told me when we first talked about it in Rue Morgue, which is all about the cover that your publisher at the time put on the first mass market paperback.
Oh, this is cool. I'm rummaging through the files from who's with me? I forget. Who's with me? Over at the office.
Oh, I was.
Okay.
Susan.
So Susan, we're going through these files, and she said, take whatever you want. I said, great, this is cool. I come across this thing called Return to Horror High. It's a cheerleader with a skull against a white background. And she's got her pom-poms on and all that shit. That's the cover they gave me for The Girl Next Door. They changed the background to red, and that's basically it. So, if you're looking for a serious, scary, you know, a true nasty horror story, you're not going to pick up that. It looks like ridiculous. And if you were looking for a fun one, well, did you have fun watching the movie? It was a total shoot in the foot, however you looked at it. At one point I was at a convention signing, and this guy came up to me and said, I got to apologize to you. When I was running a bookstore at the time, and when I got The Girl Next Door, I put it with the R.L. Stine novels. I said, you're really lucky some irate dad didn't come after you with a shotgun.
Given that cover and obviously given the content of the book, was there any backlash against it when it was first published?
It died. It was shot in the foot. That book was not discovered until, rediscovered until Dave Hinchberger, the Overlook Connection, was looking to publish his second novel in limited edition. And he had a connection with Stephen King. And it turned out, I had talked to Stephen before then about other things. And it turned out that Steve was a big fan of the book and had been ever since it came out. So he insisted on writing a 16-page introduction to it. He said, I'll do it for free. I just like the book. That book put the book back on the map, because if Stephen likes something, especially for 16 pages, people notice. And then I had lots of other really fine writers do backstory stuff in the back of the book. So it got a lot of press and publicity. And that gave it a whole new life, and now it's in editions in 5 different languages, and it's got a film, and I'm just, you know, this girl's had some pretty good legs.
I'm going to ask the same question again, but in a more current context. Since it's gotten all this attention, since Leisure Books reissued it as a mass market paperback once again, since it's been translated into all these languages, since this wonderful film is being made, have you gotten any backlash?
Oh yeah, I got my first ever hate mail on this one. Yeah, Dave, again from Overlook, and his then girlfriend, framed it. They put in all the covers, including the cheerleader cover, that had been done thus far. And then they put in this note from a woman in Florida who said, Jack Ketchum's a fucking idiot, I'll never buy a goddamn Jack Ketchum book again, this is sick, it's pornographic, etc., etc. So they made a plaque. It's on my desk. And yeah, I've gotten, especially since the film has come out, there's on my message board, there's been an ongoing dialogue about this. And at one point, one person wrote, everybody who's involved in this film, particularly writers, should rot in hell forever. I'm a abused kid myself, and and I understand that point of view completely. This is not something that I expect everybody to want to sit through or read through. But one of the other writers pointed out that if you got the DVD with the cover with the girl blindfolded and her bloody mouth and stuff, why did you buy it in the first place? This is a pretty good description of what goes on in there. So it's been an interesting, you know, give and take. People seem to either love this thing or hate it, with not a lot in between. And that's, for me, that's just fine.
I think sometimes when people are that divided over a work, that really signifies that a work is powerful.
If we didn't offend somebody, we wouldn't have done our jobs. At least I feel that way about the book, and I know the screenwriters felt the same way.
At this point, like I said, this is about all of you guys here. I would like to open it up to questions from the audience. Feel free to ask Jack about The Girl Next Door, about the film you saw before that, The Lost, about any of his fiction, or anything that might be on your minds. Right at the edge there.
Were you ever tempted to use a happy ending, happy studio ending?
No. That's an easy one. No, I wanted this book to hurt you. I wanted you to have to think about it, to put yourself in David's place, because it is, after all, a first-person narrative. And I wanted you to hear his voice as almost your own voice. And I wanted you to be squeamish, I wanted you to be afraid, I wanted you to be attracted, titillated, and I wanted you to be broken, really broken. I wanted to hurt you.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you.
That worked.
There's a question here from the gentleman in the glasses.
Yeah, the movie was really true to the book up until around the ending.
Yeah.
And I just gotta say, I love both the book and the movie, but I like the conclusion of the book more. It was way more satisfying. With the stairs and whatnot. Did you have any say?
Budget. I had no say in it. The budget happened. To do the push down the stairs, they were going to hire a stunt when they couldn't afford it. So they refilled it.
Right here.
One of the things I found most disturbing about the book was the sense of culpability I felt by reading the first-person viewpoint character of David. I felt that was missing in the movie, though. He was the good guy. Was that deliberately done?
Well, I think you're talking. What your problem might be the nature of the medium of movies. You can't really. There's a trick to writing first person. I sort of believe that every time you read any book, a piece of fiction anyway, you put your own voice into the voice that the book has. You're going to be reading both narrative pieces and dialogue pieces in somewhat your own voice. It's augmented a lot when it's first person, because you're hearing that ongoing voice that begins with the first page and continues on through the book if it's well done. You can't do that in a film. There's no way to get you quite in there that deeply into that particular character. Their innovation, and I think this movie would fall apart completely without the beginning and the end wraparound, because that does give you the sense that there is another person here who's not David, who's an older David, who has this horrifying thing to look back on in his life and settle. And that, in that way, they managed to capture as best they could, I think, on film, that sense of almost elegiac sadness. You know, and I can't think of how they would make them do it without that. But I think that's the nature of the film.
I I'd like to follow that up with a quick question. Many people, obviously, over the years have said that this story is unfilmable. The story will never make it to film.
I said that.
You said that as well. What was it about Daniel Farrens and Philip Nutman, those were the screenwriters on the film, what was it about their proposed approach to adapting your novel that made you give them a shot, that made you think that they might be able to pull it off?
Well, I didn't know Dan. Dan was the one who proposed doing it to his writing partner, Phil Nutman. Dan called Phil at some point and said, "I've got this book. I'm curious about this book. I hear it's real good. Jack Ketchum's Girl Next Door." And Phil laughed because Phil and I had been friends for many years previously. And he's in the back of the Overlook edition. He's one of the people who wrote the afterwards. And so he told him that. And he said, "Frankly, Dan, I don't think you can make a movie." He said, "Yeah, I think you can make a movie." So Phil rethought it and then they contacted me. And I said, "Guys, give it a shot. I think you're out of your minds." We agreed to, I agreed to give them an option to write a screenplay for $1 and a good contract. It had to be a solid contract. So that's how little confidence I had that this was ever going to come off. So that went on, and they tried to market it for, I believe Phil told me, in almost 8 years. People would nibble at it and say, "No, we just can't do it." And some people were outright angry that they were sent the script. And it languished. In fact, the contract languished, the option expired. Then Andrew Vandenhouten read it on a trip to, I think, Mexico, I'm not sure, some place like that. And he contacted my agent contacted me, he said, "I want to option it." I said, "Sure, on one condition, that you use Phil Nutman's and Dan Farron's screenplay," because I was blown away by how good that screenplay was. If you want to know exactly how good that screenplay was, it's not all up on the screen. It is on the DVD. The screenplay is an addition to the DVD. But this film got it pretty close. I'm not dissing the film. But that was conditional. And Andrew at first balked and said, because I guess he would develop his own. I said, "Read the damn thing." And as soon as he did and Bill Miller, his partner, did, they said, "Yeah, we're going to go with this. It's great."
Were there more questions out in the audience?
Yeah.
I'll keep going. I've been a fan of yours since the beginning, a collector. I have everything, first edition, signed, numbered. Weed Species was the first one I was disappointed in, and I tell you why, not because of your writing or skill, but I've heard the Bernardo story here in Ontario over and over and over, and lost all of its impact.
Why do
What's
it?
been the response to the Weed Species?
I was very aware of the Bernardo killings fairly a long time ago, but the U.S. isn't. I mean, you guys all know the story, but the U.S. really doesn't at all. And I thought, this is something that, this is an overlooked case. And it also presented for me, I like challenges as a writer. And when I read about this, when I started thinking about actually writing it, I thought I want to do something a little bit different here. I want to do largely dialogue and very, very flat, almost newspaper-style prose. The dialogue would be lively, but the style of the narrative is going to be just so flat. And the notion of Weed Species, I had that phrase on my bulletin board for years before I connected it to the Bernardo case. And the notion of Weed Species is everybody in that book is a weed. It's not just them. They're surrounded by it. The only person you maybe want to have lunch with is the poor girl he raped, and got through it. Everybody else are weeds. Even the people that he listens to on the radio are slime bags. And I thought, let's just go as dark as you can possibly go on this. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you can't please everybody.
No, that's just familiarity.
But I can see why.
Yeah.
I can see why it's not going to have the impact for the Canadian audience. It's gotten a pretty good impact for the U.S. audience, but I guess, again, it's because it's not familiar to us.
At least you didn't send Carla off to the Caribbean happily ever after.
Oh, no. I gave her a hard time with you.
I think there's a question way at the back. Yeah, way at the back.
Quick question. Every book of yours that I read so far is one of those books you sit down and you're uncomfortable.
Good.
Every reason, which is mission accomplished. So I think every book that I read of yours, they progressively get you more and more comfortable. So in about 10 years from now, are we going to have to be sitting in a insane asylum to read? Or are we going to sit there strapped up and have a page turn?
I have an anecdote for your discomfort.
Love it.
I do. Read Red.
Read?
Red has a sort of sweet underbelly to it, and I think that might help you feel a little bit better about yourself.
So it's like crying while eating brownies.
Huh?
So like crying and eating brownies at the same
Well,
time?
I hope Red will make you cry, but I also think it will make you happy at the very end.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a question right in the middle somewhere from someone who hasn't asked us. Oh, at the side? All right, side.
Yeah.
You mentioned how you like a challenge as a writer. I'm just wondering, so almost addressing this too, how you sort of see yourself getting progressively, what's the word, darker in that when you said when this book first came out, you said it fell flat, and the movie languished for 8 years, and now you've got this movie comes out, and it's a relatively big budget mainstream movie based on the same story with Ellen Page coming to American Crime, I think.
Yeah.
So how do you
Yeah.
what do you think has changed to the point where when you first approach the material, when you first come across the material, it's sort of almost taboo, you can't touch it, and now there's essentially big Hollywood movies where they use that same material, and how do you address that when you're writing to sort of keep, so you don't language, and you don't sort of become stagnant?
Well, let me get this correct. These are two separate questions.
Yes.
Why did this movie actually was able to happen at this particular time? Is one.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think probably the door was opened by what they call torture porn movies, which I think is a stupid term. Torture porn. If you want torture porn, go on the internet and you'll see real torture porn. These are scripted movies. They're stories. They happen to be very gory horror stories. But be that as it may. But I think when movie people see that thing happening, that door opening, they say, well, yeah, we can do this now, because gee, they like to copy. And I think maybe initially this was thought of as, well, maybe we could fund this because that's it. Of course, this is not that. This has far more serious intent and has more gravitas. But maybe that opened the door a little bit. I don't know, but that's my best guess. As far as the trajectory of what I write now, is that the second part of the question? I've been lightening up. I've been writing a lot more, Weed Species being the exception, because that I think is the darkest thing I've ever written. I've been writing a lot of black comedy. I just find myself trying to amuse myself more and more. Hell, I've been writing poetry. I've got my next book, my next original book that's going to come out is a series of 4 memoirs. And it's fun to be able to move around as a writer. I never want to pigeonhole myself. Going back to Red, Red was just filmed recently, and it's going to premiere at Sundance I think it's the 20th of the month. And that's a fairly mainstream book. It's got a horrific beginning, and it's got a horrific end. But it's also got a sweetness of character to it. I don't know if I'll ever completely lighten up, but I don't want to bore myself as a writer. I want to be able to mess around. I want to be able to write a haiku if I want.
For those of the audience members who haven't read, do you want to give them a brief summary of what the story's about?
I walked into my neighborhood bar one day, and my bartender, who knew I loved animals a lot, said, "Did you see that soundbite on CNN today?" And I said, "What soundbite?" He said, "This old guy was down by the stream fishing with his well-loved old dog, mongrel dog, and some kids came by, one of whom had a shotgun, and asked him for money. He didn't have any money, so they shot his dog. Just that slight." So that's the opening of Red. And I never did see the soundbite, and I never got a follow-up on it, but it made me mad. It pissed me off, and I often write pretty well when I'm pissed off. And I thought to myself, what this guy was doing on CNN, it turned out, was he tried to go through the legal system and found out that, in fact, nobody was going to prosecute these kids, even they knew exactly who they were, because the value of an old dog is absolutely zilch. And no one would take on the case, even though he had a spent shotgun shell, which could have been linked to the gun. So he was trying to get some justice through this reporter at CNN. Whether he ever did, again, I don't know. But I wanted my guy to get justice, however, whatever it took. So I wrote about the legal system and how it denies us that kind of justice and how angry that made me. And then I said, okay, at some point this guy's going to have to take matters into his own hands and get what he needs. So he does.
Along with this, oftentimes it seems your books are very much influenced by things you read in the news, things that make you mad, true, real life things. But the other thing that's very evident in your fiction is that you seem to really enjoy almost exploring the dark side of humanity, the dark side of you and I, or the guy next door, girl next door, woman next door. What is it about that that seems to be such a bottomless well for you?
Well, enjoy is a funny word. There's no real glee in it. Again, I don't do stuff like, I rarely do stuff that's simply entertainment. Most of my stuff, you're right, is reality-based. Even short stories are often reality-based. I like working from a dark beginning to something something sweet or something about us that's valuable and good. A good example, I think, is my first book, Off Season. That's a relentlessly nasty book. On the other hand, it's also about a group of characters who I want to rise to the occasion of this horrible attack. And essentially, it's about what we're capable of in stress, in extreme situations, or in some cases are not capable of. So I'm not accenting the bad guys here, although I think to do this decently, you've got to get your bad guys down as well as you've got to get your good guys down. And you've got to also kind of make them human and sympathetic, as I think Ruth is in the film. Not essentially, sympathetic might be the right word, but you've got to understand them to a degree. Otherwise, they're simply cardboard monsters. They're Freddy or Jason. I don't want to ever do that. So I try to draw that as carefully as I draw the people I do love. But I've been told once, and this was pointed out to me, and I really didn't realize it before, that if there's any single common thread to my stuff, it's about loss. And loss is something that's much more tender than horror. And I think I'm really writing from a kind of tender point of view. I want the best for us, and I see the worst for us. But I want the angelic to get in there too.
I know there are a couple more questions up there. At the side here, sir.
Yeah, there's a lot of books to read in the movies or something. Is there any times for, say, Ladies' Night or
Ladies' Night was, what was the other one?
Off Season or Ladies' Night?
Ladies' Night was optioned by Stuart Gordon a while back, and in fact, we did a co-scripting thing on it. The option has expired. I'm hoping at some point he picks it up again, because he did a nice script, and mine was just sort of additional material to his stuff. And that would be very fun to do. I mean, I'd love to. New York goes crazy, women against the guys, hey! Yeah, that's probably the silliest book I ever wrote, but I like it. As for Off-Season, it's been optioned, and it's been bought, I take it back. Since it was bought, I haven't seen hire or hear of the guy who bought it, so I have no idea where that's going to go, if it'll go anywhere. There are options out on my horror western, The Crossings, and there's one out on Joyride, which I've seen the script for, it's very good. The writer's strike has put a kibosh on all of this at this particular point, so I don't know what will happen.
There's a question in the middle. Yeah, right there, waving your hand.
One thing I do admire about your work, and you talked about it earlier, is your love of animals. It really comes through in a lot of short stories. There's a couple of peaceful cases. Can you just touch upon that? Is it a conscious?
You kick an animal in my books, you're probably dead. I've always loved animals ever since I was a little boy, and I have 4 cats, and they teach me a lot. They also distress me a lot, and they're expensive, goddamn. Yeah, I mean, I find a lot of wisdom and peace in just watching a cat. Just watching them when they move, watching them sleep, why they wake up, when they wake up, what wakes them up. They're endless sources of fascination because you can't get into that brain. I can sort of understand what you're thinking, sort of, not entirely, of course. But I think I'd probably give a year of my life for about a day inside of a cat's brain. I think I'm that curious. What the hell is going on in there? You know, whatever it is, it's got a lot of good shit in it. You ever see a cat leap? Whoa, poetry in motion.
Are there any more questions out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
I've seen a listing for your leisure book coming out in the next couple months, Old Flame.
Yeah.
But it's listed as a reprint, is it?
No. Old Flames is an original novella. It's a long novella. What's reprinted is the back of the book is Right to Life. They're putting those two together. So that, if they're giving you that impression, they have to...
It's just a Locust magazine.
Okay, well that's not correct.
Where's the first edition?
No, Old Flames is new.
Just a compliment. I thought the story you collaborated with Trish was the best story in that anthology.
Thank you, that was fun to do.
Chrissy's a good friend of mine, and I look forward to reading it, because
Yeah, she's
I
great.
both your work, and it's just really popular.
She's great. We got, this is a fun idea, I'll briefly explain it. An item in the newspaper. These two people correspond via the internet, and one's a teenage girl, and the other guy is an older guy, and the teenage girl just masquerades as an older woman. And they finally decide to meet, to pretty disastrous consequences. But it was such fun to do that because we did it via email. We would do it, she took the part of the young teenage girl, and I took the part of the older guy, and then I just edited back and forth, and she edited back and forth. It was a fun way to collaborate. We had a good time.
It looks like we're getting the signal to somewhat wrap this up. Before we go, though, is there anything that you're currently working on? Any kind of scoops you can give our audience here?
Oh, dear. Well, you can look for a memoir from me soon, but I don't really know exactly what the title is going to be. We haven't quite settled on it. And that's the book of 4 memoirs, which I think is kind of fun. Fun. They're dark memoirs, but they're also kind of happy. So that may please you, because they're kind of happy. I think that's about it for right now.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, for coming and answering all our questions. And I believe Jack will be out front signing copies of his books. You can also buy copies of his books out front, so please do.
Thanks.
Good night.
Yeah.